Not all of you are clean. Tell me something I don't know. The question is, how do we understand this concept of following in Jesus' footsteps or his example? How do we do that? How do we interpret Scripture so that we can fully embrace this example of Jesus in our lives today, 2,000 years later, where things seem to be a little bit more complex? Fast-paced? Electronically driven, maybe? The Second Amendment of the Constitution says, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. How do we interpret this amendment in the light of this gospel? Or any gospel? That's a task that we have to undertake, don't we? As people of the faith, as Christian people. Gun control, gay marriage. If I go on some of the news lines, those are the two big headings I see today. The gay marriage issue, gun control, and what's going on with that. These two hot topics are something that we Christians and everybody else in this world struggles with. How do we keep each other safe? And how do we live our faith in the midst of something that's so tumultuous and can be read in several different ways and interpreted in several different ways, and people's viewpoints of how to make it happen? And so we want everybody to be safe and cared for. I certainly don't want anything bad to happen to you, to my family, to anybody else. How do we interpret this gospel in the light of what's going on in this world? It's tough stuff. It's not easy. It'd almost be easier if we had a set of rules to say, first step this, second step that. If God were more of an engineer and spelled it out for us exactly how we're to do things, it would be nice, wouldn't it? But we have more of a way of coming to grips with things and communicating with each other and trying to figure things out together. This whole text, this washing of the feet. And by the way, this washing of the feet that happened 2 weeks ago with Mary or another gospel was some woman that came in and washed his feet with oil or hair and tears. And all these are a little different, aren't they? The washing of the feet with oil and the hair, that was not in the ordinary at all. That was out of the ordinary. Jesus turning around and washing his disciples' feet is out of the ordinary. That just doesn't happen. It's interesting, in the last couple weeks, we have these two foot washings in two different ways. Jesus getting his feet washed by someone questionable, maybe, and then Jesus washing his feet, the feet of his disciples, questionable, maybe? Yeah, there are rules. As Peter says, wait a minute, what are you doing washing our feet? You never wash my feet because you are my master. There are rules. Didn't you read Exodus where in the Passover you got to do the lamb, you got to do the blood, you can't boil it, you can't do this, and you got to invite your neighbors if you can't eat. There are rules for this. Now, Jesus, you're turning it upside down and making it as you go along, aren't you? What's up with that? But as we know through the gospel, Jesus always has a reason for things he does. Even when he goes out and says, I'm going to go alone and pray. Just leave me alone for a while. I'm going to go pray. There's a reason for everything Jesus did. In that span of 3 years, he's with his disciples and with other people. And the disciples are more than just 12, by the way. They were men and women. There are a lot of them. We just know of 12 specifically in these Gospels. But as you read in Acts and some others, there are more disciples than there are. But 3 years, he's got an agenda. Everything he does has a reason for it. And this text is not so much about Jesus washing someone else's feet, his disciples. It's about washing my feet, your feet, our feet. I'm not so sure I want him washing my feet. To be honest with you, I'm a little embarrassed. I mean, feet represent, following. You use your feet to follow. Metaphorically, you follow Jesus with your feet. I'm not so sure I want him to know about where my feet have been, or sometimes where my feet are going. I'm not so sure I want him to see those long toes and knobby ankles and all those things and dirty whatever. I don't think I want that exposed. I'm a little embarrassed. I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy. You remember that one, don't you? I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy. Those who in the 80s, we know what that's all about. not understanding what Jesus is doing for them. We don't always get it either. We put up roadblocks, just as Peter does. He's trying to put a roadblock up to what Jesus is trying to do. And Jesus doesn't like it. You don't understand. This is all part of my plan. You're throwing a roadblock into what I'm trying to teach you about being true disciples. Not only are you leaders of this word, this way of following, you're also followers. You're also servants. You have to take that in consideration. It's a two-edged sword. You're leaders and you're followers. You're servants too. And probably the most important is being the serving part. Our text tonight is our chance to allow Jesus to get into our feet, to get into our lives and wash them clean, to scrub, to polish, to do whatever you need to do. Get a real pedicure, but not with all the cutesy colors, but just really getting in there and scrubbing away all those things in our lives that prevent us from true discipleship. All those things, so that we can follow him a little better. In those days, they wore sandals and they had bare feet, and it was a little bit rougher than it is today. Foot washing had to be a daily occurrence, if not more than that. Try to get your daughter into a bath. It's almost impossible to get her into a bathtub. Then it's almost impossible to get her out of the bathtub. How does that work? We don't want Jesus to wash our feet, but yet when he does wash the feet, we don't want him to stop. Keep going. This feels okay. This is all right. I feel well taken care of like I've never been taken care of before. No one treats me like that. This is a wonderful sensation. And Jesus says to his disciples, you got to be mindful of the grace of both of these roles that I'm performing. The grace that I am a teacher for you, that I'm the Messiah, that I go about, I heal people. I help free people that are oppressed. I send people that have leprosy. I heal them and send them back into the community so they can be accepted by their friends and their family once again. And then I'm washing your feet. And there's grace in letting somebody wash your feet and being a follower and allowing somebody else to take care of you. Some of the hardest things we do as we get older is to shed the sense of independence, because we know that we need to be interdependent with each other. We can't live alone. We have to have people with us, supporting us and helping, washing our feet, so to speak. No rigid rules with Jesus. No rigid rules at all. You think about this Jesus washing the feet, and you think about the prodigal son's father. He didn't care what he looked like. He just loved his son so much, he ran to see him, hugged him, kissed him on the cheek, and gave him all these extravagant gifts and a party and a welcome home. Didn't care if it was humiliating for him. All he wanted to do was have his son back. All Jesus wants to do in his last days before he knows he's going to die, what would you do? How would you spend that time? Jesus spends it surrounded by his friends, in a circle of love, in a circle of hope. To outsiders who look at this, it looks kind of ridiculous, shameful. To insiders, when the occasion when God honors the one who honors him. Death is not Jesus' punishment, but his voluntary obedience to God. And the funny thing is, even Judas, the betrayer, is included in all this. That's the scandal of this whole way that we call ourselves Christians. Judas, knowing that he will betray Jesus, and Jesus, knowing that Judas will betray him, still dips bread, still gives him the wine, still gets his shirt off and washes Judas's feet like everybody else's feet, knowing full well what Judas has in mind. That's something else. I couldn't do that. I mean, I'm a follower. I hope to be a follower, but I can only do it in bits and pieces. I'm sure that all of you can only do bits and pieces of this stuff. It's tough stuff. but we try. We continue our journey. We continually ask Jesus to wash our hands, wash our feet, feed us with the bread of life, with the blood of Christ, weekly, monthly, whatever it does, whatever it takes us. We remember our baptism so that we can continue to be focused and so that we can do bits and pieces of this journey that Jesus showed us. And it's not so much as wearing a patch or a bling that says, what would Jesus do, or a cross, or something that shows. It's more than that. It's deeper than that. It's much more than the bling that we sometimes see out there. St. Francis of Assisi wore brown, and you know why? Because he identified with the earth. It's earth color, meaning he was a servant of all. That was the symbol for him, that he was a servant and always will be a servant. It's not just a soundbite. Jesus freed the captives. He gave hope where it was needed, with people who really needed it the most. He brought hope and life to people, to those lepers that had no hope, those people that were blind, the people that were sick, Lazarus who was dead, and his sisters who were just beyond despair. He brought them all hope. How exactly did he do that? Look at his life of nonviolence, of servanthood. That's a strong message from a humble guy. And sometimes that's the most powerful of all, that quiet, humble servant leader that we all can be part of, that we all are part of in our lives. To allow Jesus to cleanse our feet is to remove all that prevents us from using our feet to follow him, to scrub away our insecurities, to wash away our weariness, and to buff off our bitterness. That's what we hope for, is that strength that comes from Jesus, who showed it to us and others way before us, that he was always the servant of us and the Lord of all. And there is hope, and there is life, abundant life in him. Amen.